Do you ever think about those Christmas decorations that filled every 1980s home with warmth and wonder? These forgotten treasures shaped how families celebrated the season. So what happened to all those beloved pieces that once made December feel complete? Bubble lights on the tree were one of those mesmerizing details that made Christmas in the 1980s feel like pure magic, happening right in your living room. Each little glass tube sat nestled among the branches, filled with a mysterious colored liquid that nobody ever questioned the contents of. When the bulb inside heated up, the liquid began to bubble and churn, sending tiny orbs floating upward in a hypnotic dance that children could watch for hours without blinking. Families gathered around the tree just to see which lights would bubble first, making bets and pointing excitedly when a new one sprang to life. The gentle gurgling sound mixed with the hum of the furnace and the distant echo of holiday music playing on the stereo. Parents warned kids not to touch the bulbs because they grew hot enough to leave a mark, but of course, curious fingers found their way there anyway. These lights came in every color imaginable, from deep red to emerald green to electric blue, each one casting its own glow against the tinsel and ornaments nearby. Nobody made decorations quite like this anymore, and that is precisely why people still hunt for vintage sets today. Angel hair spun glass was the kind of decoration that looked absolutely heavenly draped across the branches of the Christmas tree, shimmering like a cloud of captured starlight. Families in the 1980s carefully pulled apart the fluffy white strands and arranged them just so, creating a soft, ethereal layer that made even the simplest tree look expensive. The way it caught the light from the bulbs was nothing short of magical, throwing tiny rainbows across the ceiling and walls when the angle was just right. But what nobody talked about openly was how much that beautiful fiber could irritate bare skin. Kids who helped decorate often ended up with itchy arms and tiny invisible splinters that drove them crazy for days. The material was actual fiberglass, spun so fine it looked harmless but carried real consequences for anyone who handled it carelessly. Some families wore gloves while decorating, but most just powered through the discomfort in the name of holiday tradition. The stuff shed constantly, leaving sparkly residue on everything it touched throughout the entire season. Today, safer alternatives have mostly replaced it, but nothing quite captures that same dreamy appearance. Flocked Christmas trees were the ultimate status symbol in 1980s living rooms, standing tall and proud with their branches coated in a thick layer of artificial snow that made them look like they had been plucked straight from a winter wonderland. Families paid extra at the tree lot for this treatment, watching with satisfaction as workers sprayed the sticky white substance onto every needle until the whole thing transformed into something out of a holiday movie. The flocking came in different textures, from soft and powdery to stiff and crystalline, depending on who did the work and what materials they used. Kids loved running their fingers through the fake snow, leaving trails and patterns until their parents shooed them away with warnings about making a mess. And mess there was, because flocked trees shed constantly, leaving white dust on presents, carpets, and anyone who brushed past on their way to the kitchen. Vacuuming around the tree became a daily chore, and by the time January arrived, the floor looked like a snowstorm had blown through indoors. The smell of the flocking chemicals mixed with fresh pine created a scent that many people still associate with the holidays. Rotating color wheel spotlights were the secret behind those magical aluminum Christmas trees that seemed to change color right before your eyes throughout the 1980s. These motorized discs sat on the floor beside the tree, plugged into the nearest outlet, and slowly spun their way through panels of red, green, blue, and gold plastic. As each color passed in front of the bright bulb inside, the entire tree transformed, shifting from one vivid hue to the next in a hypnotic cycle that never grew old. The soft, mechanical hum of the motor became part of the background soundtrack of the holiday season, as familiar as carols on the radio or the pop of logs in the fireplace. Children would lie on the carpet and stare at the changing colors reflecting off hundreds of metallic branches, mesmerized by the way the light seemed to dance and flow. Parents loved these wheels because they eliminated the fire hazard of putting electric lights on flammable aluminum trees, a genuine safety concern that drove their popularity. The simplicity of the design meant they lasted for decades, passed down through families who could not imagine Christmas without that slow, steady glow. Tinsel icicles by the box were an absolute staple of Christmas tree decorating in the 1980s, sold in long, flat packages that promised instant glamour for just a few dollars. Families would spend entire evenings carefully hanging these thin metallic strands one by one on every branch, creating a shimmering curtain that caught every twinkle from the lights behind it. The dedication required was enormous, and many parents insisted on proper technique, draping each strand individually rather than tossing handfuls at the tree like some impatient children preferred. By the time the tree was fully dressed, it looked absolutely spectacular, glittering and gleaming like something from a department store window display. But the aftermath was another story entirely. Tinsel ended up everywhere, tangled in the carpet, wrapped around pet fur, stuck to socks, and most memorably jammed deep inside the vacuum cleaner where it would cause problems for months to come. Cats found it irresistible and often ate strands that caused trips to the veterinarian. Taking down the tree meant collecting thousands of these strands one by one, a tedious job that made everyone question whether the sparkle was truly worth the effort. Ceramic light-up trees were treasured centerpieces in countless 1980s homes, handmade labors of love that often came from craft classes, church groups, or patient grandmothers with steady hands. These tabletop trees were molded from clay and painted in deep greens, then fitted with dozens of tiny plastic bulbs in every color of the rainbow that plugged into a base with a single cord. When the switch flipped on, the whole tree glowed from within, casting a warm-colored light that transformed any room into something cozy and magical. Many families had more than one, placing them on mantels, side tables, and bedroom dressers throughout the house until everywhere you looked, another little tree sparkled back at you. Children loved counting the bulbs and finding the ones that had burned out, carefully twisting in replacements from a little bag kept nearby. These trees represented hours of painstaking work, from the initial shaping of the clay to the final glazing and firing in a kiln. They were never thrown away, only wrapped carefully in tissue paper and stored until next December, when they would emerge again to continue their tradition. Paper honeycomb bells and balls were the cheerful, colorful decorations that appeared in doorways, corners, and ceilings of every home celebrating Christmas in the 1980s. They came flat in packages, folded tight like accordions, and transformed into full three-dimensional shapes when you pulled them open and fastened the edges together with a tiny tab. The tissue paper came in bright reds, greens, whites, and golds, sometimes striped or patterned for extra visual interest. Kids found the unfolding process almost as exciting as opening presents, watching in amazement as a flat piece of paper suddenly became a plump, round ball or an elegant bell shape. These decorations hung from thumbtacks, pressed into door frames, dangled from light fixtures, and clustered together in festive bunches that swayed gently whenever someone walked past. They were impossibly lightweight and rustled with the softest sound, adding a whisper of movement to otherwise still rooms. The fragility was part of their charm, though many got crushed when stored carelessly and had to be replaced each year. Craft stores sold them in multi-packs, making it easy to fill an entire house with their papery cheerfulness. Plastic stained glass window decorations transformed ordinary windows into colorful works of art throughout the 1980s holiday season, turning even the dullest winter light into something magical. These translucent Klingon sheets featured designs of Santa Claus, Christmas trees, snowflakes, angels, and nativity scenes, all rendered in bold primary colors that glowed brilliantly when sunlight passed through them. Families pressed them against the glass with careful hands, smoothing out air bubbles and repositioning until everything sat perfectly in place. From outside, these windows became beacons of holiday cheer, visible from the street and announcing to every passerby that this household was fully committed to the Christmas spirit. Children loved picking their favorite designs and claiming windows as their own decorating territory. The plastic was reusable year after year, though over time the colors faded slightly and the edges began to curl from being peeled off and stored so many times. Some families built entire collections, adding new designs annually until every window in the house blazed with color. The effect was like living inside a kaleidoscope during the darkest days of December. Puts houses and cardboard villages were the miniature worlds that families in the 1980s created beneath their Christmas trees, building entire tiny towns complete with churches, shops, and cozy cottages. These little structures came coated in glitter that sparkled under the tree lights, their windows often backed with colored cellophane to simulate a warm glow from within. Families collected them piece by piece over many years, adding new buildings each season until the village sprawled across the entire tree skirt and sometimes beyond. Some sets included tiny figurines of carolers, lampposts, and even horse-drawn carriages that added life to the frozen streets. Children spent hours arranging and rearranging the buildings, creating neighborhoods and imagining the tiny people who lived inside. The glitter shed constantly, mixing with fallen pine needles to create a sparkly carpet that announced the holidays had truly arrived. These villages often became family heirlooms, carefully wrapped and stored each year, with children eventually inheriting the collections their parents and grandparents had built. The whole tradition captured something deeply nostalgic about an imagined small-town Christmas. Electric window candles were the quiet sentinels of Christmas in the 1980s, standing in every visible window of the house to welcome visitors and spread holiday cheer to the neighborhood. Each plastic candle held a single bulb shaped like a flame, glowing orange or white depending on the style, and plugged into the nearest outlet with a cord that snaked discreetly along the windowsill. Families bought them by the dozen, ensuring every front-facing window displayed its own warm beacon. The effect from outside was stunning, row after row of glowing candles creating a picture of warmth and hospitality that made even strangers feel welcome. Inside, the candles cast a gentle light that mixed with the tree and other decorations to create an atmosphere of total holiday immersion. Some families used automatic timers so the candles turned on at dusk and off at bedtime, saving electricity and ensuring the display appeared promptly every evening without fail. The bulbs burned out regularly and needed replacing, a small maintenance task that became part of the seasonal routine. These simple decorations carried enormous emotional weight for many people. Blow-mold plastic yard figures were the glowing guardians of every neighborhood lawn throughout the 1980s, standing proudly in snow or brown grass to announce that Christmas had officially arrived. These hollow plastic Santas, snowmen, reindeer, and nativity characters came in every size imaginable, from modest, knee-high carolers to towering 6-foot clauses that dominated front yards like festive monuments. Inside each figure sat a single incandescent bulb that transformed the plastic shell into a beacon of colored light visible from blocks away. Families collected them over the years, adding new characters each season until their yards resembled crowded holiday villages. The plastic was surprisingly durable, surviving winters of ice, wind, and the occasional collision with a snow shovel, though the colors faded gradually under years of sunlight. Kids loved them because they made ordinary yards feel magical, and parents loved them because setup required nothing more than an extension cord. Some families left them out well past New Year, reluctant to pack away the cheerfulness they brought to dark winter evenings. Glitter-dipped pine cone ornaments were the handmade treasures that children brought home from school craft projects and families created together during long December afternoons in the 1980s. The process was delightfully messy, involving bottles of white glue, bowls of loose glitter in every color, and pine cones gathered from backyards or purchased from craft stores. Kids would brush thick layers of glue onto every scale and crevice, then roll the sticky pine cone through piles of sparkle until it emerged transformed into something dazzling. The glitter never stayed entirely on the ornament, spreading across tables, floors, clothing, and somehow into every corner of the house for weeks afterward. Parents tied ribbons through the top scales to create hangers, and each finished ornament carried the proud fingerprints of whoever made it. These sparkly creations hung on trees alongside store-bought balls and tinsel, holding a place of honor because they represented effort and family togetherness. Many families kept them for years, carefully wrapping each glittery pine cone in tissue paper because throwing away something a child made felt impossible. Styrofoam snowmen kits appeared in craft stores every November throughout the 1980s, promising families an easy way to create adorable winter decorations without waiting for actual snow. Each kit contained 3 white foam balls of graduating sizes, plus an assortment of felt pieces, plastic eyes, fabric scraps, and sometimes pipe cleaners for arms. Children would carefully stack the balls using toothpicks or glue, then spend hours personalizing their snowmen with top hats, scarves, button noses, and whatever else their imagination suggested. The styrofoam squeaked horribly when pieces rubbed together, a sound that drove some parents quietly crazy, but never seemed to bother the kids at all. Finished snowmen sat on mantels, bookshelves, and windowsills, their slightly crooked smiles and lopsided hats giving each one a personality that store-bought decorations could not match. The foam crumbled easily if handled too roughly, leaving tiny white beads scattered across carpets that took forever to clean up completely. Some families made new snowmen every year while others kept their favorites, the felt fading and the foam yellowing slightly with age, but the charm remaining intact. Bead garland strands were the sparkling chains that spiraled around Christmas trees in the 1980s, adding layers of shimmer that caught and reflected every nearby light. These long strings of plastic or glass beads came in silver, gold, red, green, and sometimes multicolored combinations, sold in boxes promising enough length to wrap even the tallest tree several times over. Families would drape them carefully from branch to branch, creating sweeping curves that gave the whole tree a sense of elegance and movement. The beads clicked softly against each other and against ornaments whenever someone brushed past, adding a gentle musical quality to the decorated room. Children loved running the smooth strands through their fingers, feeling each bead pass one by one like counting prayers or wishes. Glass versions were heavier and more expensive, while plastic versions offered the same visual effect at a fraction of the cost and weight. Untangling these garlands each December became an annual ritual that tested patience and dexterity, with some families eventually giving up and buying new strands rather than fighting the knots. Aluminum foil icicles were the stiff, shiny cousins of tinsel that hung from branches in rigid lines throughout the 1980s, catching light in ways that made trees sparkle like frozen waterfalls. Unlike the thin, flexible tinsel strands that draped and swayed, these metallic icicles held their shape, pointing downward in perfect formation like actual ice had formed overnight on indoor branches. Families hung them one by one or in small clusters, spacing them evenly to create a uniform effect that looked almost architectural in its precision. The aluminum caught both natural daylight and artificial tree lights, throwing bright reflections across walls and ceilings that danced whenever air currents moved through the room. Kids found them fascinating because they could be bent and shaped, twisted into spirals or curves that transformed ordinary icicles into tiny sculptures. Storage was always a challenge because the aluminum bent permanently if crushed, meaning each icicle needed careful handling during the post-holiday takedown. Many families eventually switched to plastic versions that proved more forgiving, but purists insisted nothing matched the reflective quality of real metal. Felt advent calendars hung on walls and doors throughout December in countless 1980s homes, counting down the days until Christmas with numbered pockets that held tiny surprises. These handmade creations often featured elaborate scenes, stitched from colorful felt, showing Christmas trees, snowy landscapes, or nativity imagery, with small pockets sewn at intervals to mark each day. Parents filled the pockets with chocolates, small candies, coins, or tiny trinkets, and children woke each morning racing to discover what treasure awaited behind that day's number. The anticipation built steadily as December progressed, with the final pocket on Christmas Eve holding something extra special. Many calendars were handmade, crafted during autumn evenings from patterns found in magazines or passed down through generations. The felt softened over years of handling, and the stitching sometimes loosened, but families kept using the same calendars decade after decade because the memories attached to them were irreplaceable. Some children grew up and eventually inherited these calendars, filling the pockets for their own kids and continuing traditions their parents had started. Door chimes with jingle bells announced every arrival and departure throughout the holiday season in 1980s homes, filling entryways with cheerful metallic ringing that made ordinary moments feel festive. These decorations hung from doorknobs, hooks, or ribbon loops attached to the top of door frames, jingling merrily whenever the door swung open or closed. Some versions combined traditional tubular chimes with clusters of small brass bells, creating layered sounds that echoed through hallways and living rooms. Others were simpler arrangements of bells alone, strung on red or green ribbon and tied with elaborate bows. Children loved making them ring, sometimes opening and closing doors repeatedly just to hear the cheerful noise until parents insisted they stop. Guests arriving for holiday gatherings were greeted by this festive soundtrack, setting the tone before they even stepped fully inside. The constant jingling could grow tiresome for families who used busy entrances frequently, leading some to remove the chimes after a few days, while others kept them ringing through New Year. The sound became so associated with the season that many people still feel nostalgia whenever they hear similar bells today. Plastic Santa boot planters stood on porches, mantels, and coffee tables throughout the 1980s. Their bright red shells and white fur trim instantly recognizable as holiday icons. These boot-shaped containers came in sizes ranging from tiny candy dishes to substantial planters capable of holding real poinsettias or arrangements of artificial greenery. Most families filled them with candy canes, wrapped chocolates, or peppermints, setting them out for guests to enjoy during holiday visits. The plastic was sturdy enough to survive years of use, though the red color sometimes faded to pink after prolonged exposure to sunlight near windows. Children viewed these boots as treasure chests, sneaking candies when they thought no one was watching and carefully rearranging the remaining pieces to hide the evidence. Some versions included glittery details, painted buckles, or attached figurines of Santa peeking over the top. Craft-minded families used them as bases for elaborate arrangements, adding silk flowers, pine cones, ornaments, and ribbon, until the simple boot became a centerpiece worthy of photographs. The boots appeared in stores every November and vanished by late December. Musical rotating tree stands transformed ordinary Christmas trees into slowly spinning spectacles throughout the 1980s, turning living rooms into miniature stages where decorations could be admired from every angle. These motorized bases held the tree trunk securely while rotating it at a gentle pace, usually completing one full revolution every minute or so. Many included built-in music boxes that played classic carols like Silent Night, Jingle Bells, or Oh Christmas Tree, the tinkling melodies drifting through the house as the tree turned. Families would gather on couches and watch the ornaments parade past, pointing out favorites and noticing details they had missed when the tree stood still. The mechanical hum of the motor blended with the music to create a soundtrack inseparable from holiday memories. Children found the rotation hypnotic, sometimes sitting for long stretches just watching the same ornaments circle around again and again. The stands required careful balancing to prevent wobbling, and heavier trees sometimes overwhelmed the motors, slowing rotations to a crawl. Despite occasional mechanical frustrations, these stands represented the height of Christmas tree technology for their era. Spray-on window snow transformed plain glass into frosted winter scenes throughout the 1980s, letting families create the illusion of a white Christmas, even in regions where real snow never fell. These aerosol cans contained thick white foam that dried into a textured coating resembling frost, and creative decorators used them to paint elaborate designs on windows, mirrors, and glass doors. The most popular technique involved spraying the corners and edges to mimic natural frost patterns, but ambitious artists created entire scenes with snowflakes, trees, and holiday messages spelled out in puffy white letters. The chemical smell was strong during application, filling rooms with fumes that prompted most families to open windows despite the cold. Children begged to help, but often sprayed too much in one spot or got carried away, covering entire panes until no light could pass through. Cleanup required scraping and wiping that left streaks and residue, a chore that made many parents vow never to buy the stuff again, a promise usually forgotten by the following November. The temporary transformation made the mess seem worthwhile. Nativity scene figurines held a place of honor in 1980s homes, arranged carefully on mantels, side tables, and beneath Christmas trees to remind families of the reason for the season. These painted ceramic or plastic sets depicted Mary, Joseph, baby Jesus, shepherds, wise men, and an assortment of animals gathered around a humble manger scene. Families unwrapped each piece with reverence every December, positioning the figures according to traditions passed down through generations. Some households added new pieces each year, expanding their collections until entire tabletops overflowed with painted robes and gentle faces. Children loved handling the figurines despite repeated warnings to be careful, and many sets bore the evidence of tiny chips and faded paint from decades of enthusiastic young hands. The scenes ranged from simple three-piece sets to elaborate displays with dozens of figures, stables, and working lights. Churches and schools set up larger versions that became focal points for holiday programs. These figurines represented something deeper than decoration, connecting families to faith and tradition in ways that transcended mere holiday cheer. Mercury glass ornaments dangled from branches in 1980s homes with a vintage elegance that made them stand out among newer decorations, their silvered interiors catching light in ways that seemed almost alive. These hollow glass balls were coated on the inside with a silvery solution that created that distinctive antique shimmer, and families treasured them as connections to Christmases past. Many ornaments had been handed down through multiple generations, their surfaces showing the gentle wear of decades spent traveling between storage boxes and tree branches. The glass was thin and fragile, requiring careful handling that children often forgot in their excitement to help decorate. When one shattered, and they did shatter with alarming regularity, the pieces scattered across floors in dangerous fragments that seemed impossible to fully clean. Parents swept and vacuumed for days afterward, finding glittering shards in unexpected places for weeks. Despite the hazards, families continued displaying these ornaments because their beauty felt irreplaceable, a glimpse of old-world craftsmanship that modern manufacturing could not duplicate. Each surviving ornament carried stories of holidays past. Popcorn and cranberry garlands were the edible decorations that families in the 1980s strung by hand during long December evenings, threading needles through kernels and berries until chains stretched long enough to drape around entire trees. The process required patience and dedication, with bowls of popped corn and fresh cranberries spread across kitchen tables while holiday music played softly. Children loved participating even when their needles wandered crookedly, or their fingers grew sore from pushing through tough berry skins. The finished garlands looked rustic and charming, their red and white colors perfectly complementing green branches and twinkling lights. But these natural decorations came with complications that became apparent within days. The popcorn dried out and crumbled, dropping white bits onto presents and tree skirts below. The cranberries shriveled, leaked juice, and attracted fruit flies that appeared seemingly from nowhere. Worst of all, household pets viewed these garlands as irresistible buffets, pulling them from branches and leaving destruction in their wake. By January, most garlands looked more like crime scenes than decorations, yet families made new ones every year. Blinking tree topper stars crowned Christmas trees throughout the 1980s with their flashy, attention-grabbing displays that made every tree feel like a celebration. These electric stars sat at the very peak of the tree, plugged into the same strand of lights that wound through the branches below, and blinked on and off in patterns that ranged from gentle pulses to rapid-fire strobing. Children found them hypnotic, lying on their backs beneath the tree and staring upward at the blinking beacon until their parents worried about their eyes. The stars came in various sizes and styles, from simple five-pointed shapes to elaborate multi-layered designs with dozens of individual bulbs. Some played music or rotated slowly while blinking, adding even more spectacle to their already dramatic presence. The blinking mechanism often failed after a few seasons, leaving families with stars that either stayed permanently lit or refused to light at all, prompting annual debates about replacement versus repair. Despite their unreliability, these toppers represented the pinnacle of tree decoration, the final touch that announced the decorating was complete and Christmas had officially arrived in the household. Frosted glass candle holders appeared on mantels, dining tables, and windowsills throughout the 1980s, their heavy pressed glass construction and etched holiday scenes adding elegance to seasonal displays. These chunky holders featured snowflakes, pine trees, reindeer, and winter village scenes carved into thick glass that diffused candlelight into a soft, warm glow. Families collected them in sets, arranging groups of 3 or 5 holders of varying heights to create centerpieces that anchored holiday tablescapes. The glass felt substantial in hand, reassuringly solid compared to cheaper plastic alternatives, and the frosted finish hid fingerprints and minor scratches that accumulated over years of use. Children were forbidden from touching them, both because of the open flames and because dropping one could crack tiles or bruise toes. The holders survived decades precisely because of their sturdy construction, passed between generations as reliable holiday staples. When lit, they transformed ordinary rooms into cozy sanctuaries, their flickering light dancing through etched patterns and casting gentle shadows on nearby walls. These decorations represented a time when holiday ambiance came from real flames. Cotton ball snow scenes were the windowsill decoration of choice for families who wanted a winter wonderland without spending a dime. Kids stretched cotton balls thin and glued them to cardboard, construction paper, or directly onto the glass, creating lumpy white landscapes meant to evoke freshly fallen snow. The cotton never lay flat, bunching in some spots and tearing in others, leaving scenes that looked more like clouds than snowdrifts. Ambitious crafters added miniature plastic figurines, tiny bottle brush trees, or construction paper houses to complete the illusion. The glue showed through in shiny streaks, and the cotton yellowed near heat vents faster than anyone expected. By the end of December, the snow scenes had collected dust and cat hair, transforming into something closer to slush than winter magic. But kids stared at their creations with pride, imagining themselves inside those cotton worlds where Christmas lasted forever. Those cotton landscapes proved that imagination could stretch further than any budget. The scenes were temporary, fragile, and imperfect, but they captured something permanent about celebrating Christmas with heart instead of money. Formaldehyde-treated artificial garlands were draped across mantels, staircases, and doorways in nearly every 1980s home, their lush green appearance lasting season after season without wilting. Families loved how realistic they looked compared to older plastic versions, and the convenience of never replacing them made the investment worthwhile. Parents wrapped them around banisters while children helped secure them with ribbons, everyone breathing in that faint chemical smell nobody questioned. The garlands held their shape because manufacturers treated them with formaldehyde, a preservative that slowly released invisible fumes throughout the holiday season. Every time someone walked past or adjusted a draped section, more chemical escaped into living spaces where families gathered. Children sleeping near decorated doorways breathed the vapors all night without anyone realizing the exposure was happening. When researchers connected formaldehyde off-gassing to respiratory irritation and long-term concerns, regulations forced manufacturers to find safer methods. The garlands that once seemed like smart investments became reminders of how convenience can mask invisible dangers. Angel hair spun glass around the manger was one of those delicate decorations that made nativity scenes shimmer with an otherworldly glow. Families would carefully drape the wispy fibers over stable roofs, around ceramic figures, and beneath tiny mangers, creating the illusion of clouds or heavenly light descending on the scene. The material looked magical, catching light from nearby candles or tree bulbs and reflecting it in soft, scattered patterns. Children were warned not to touch it because the fine glass strands could irritate skin, which only made the angel hair seem more mysterious and precious. Adults handled it with bare hands anyway, gently pulling apart clumps and arranging them with patience the season seemed to encourage. Some families reused the same angel hair year after year, carefully repacking it in tissue paper. Others bought fresh packages, enjoying the ritual of opening something new that would transform their manger into a glowing centerpiece. Over time, safety concerns pushed real spun glass angel hair out of stores and the tradition faded. But for those who remember arranging it by hand, The shimmering strands remain a symbol of Christmas magic made visible. Electric blankets without temperature controls were winter essentials that families plugged in and forgot about throughout the cold months of the 1980s. These heated bed covers promised cozy nights and warm toes, and grandparents gave them as Christmas gifts, believing they were offering comfort and practicality wrapped in one package. The blankets heated unevenly, with hot spots that could blister skin and cold patches that defeated the entire purpose. Wires running through the fabric frayed with use, creating spark points that smoldered against sheets and mattresses while families slept unaware. House fires started by electric blankets became a pattern that investigators traced back to designs with no automatic shutoff and no way to regulate how hot the coils became. People folded them, bunched them, and tucked them tightly around their bodies in ways that trapped heat until the fabric itself began to scorch. Children sleeping under these blankets had no way of knowing when warmth crossed the line into danger. By the time safety standards required temperature sensors and automatic shutoffs, an entire generation had spent winters wrapped in wiring that could have ignited at any moment without warning. Construction paper chains were the unofficial uniform of budget Christmas decorating, draped across mantels, doorways, and classroom walls with equal enthusiasm. Every kid knew the drill. Cut strips of red and green paper, loop them together with paste or staples, and stretch the chain as far as supplies allowed. The chains never stayed perfectly even because tiny hands measured by instinct rather than rulers, and the paste always dried too slowly or too fast. By the time Christmas arrived, some loops had already popped open, leaving sad gaps that nobody bothered to fix. Schools encouraged these chains because they cost almost nothing and kept children busy for hours, which suited teachers and parents equally well. At home, the chains wound around banisters, hung from ceiling fans, and sometimes connected rooms in an unbroken line of holiday effort. The paper faded quickly if placed near windows, turning festive red into washed-out pink. But the chains represented pure childhood labor, hours of cutting and looping while dreaming of presents and snow days. Even now, the memory of paste-sticky fingers and curling paper strips carries a warmth no expensive garland can match. PVC blow-mold yard figures with toxic plasticizers stood proudly on lawns throughout the 1980s, their cheerful Santas and snowmen glowing from internal bulbs that made neighborhoods feel magical after dark. Families collected them over years, adding new figures each season until entire yards became illuminated winter wonderlands. Children loved running between them, touching their smooth plastic surfaces and peering inside at the warm orange glow of incandescent bulbs. These figures were made from polyvinyl chloride softened with plasticizers that made the material flexible enough to mold into complex shapes. Under summer storage heat and winter bulb warmth, those plasticizers slowly migrated to the surface and released fumes that drifted across yards where families gathered. The chemicals responsible for making the plastic pliable were later linked to hormone disruption, especially troubling for children who spent hours playing near the glowing figures. When regulations tightened around these compounds, manufacturers scrambled to reformulate. The beloved yard decorations that defined neighborhood holiday spirit became symbols of an era that prioritized appearance over safety. Hanging real mistletoe over doorways was a holiday tradition that added a playful hint of romance to even the most ordinary family gathering. Bundles of the waxy green plant with its white berries appeared in stores each December, and families hung them from door frames with red ribbon, waiting to see who might get caught underneath. The rules were simple. If two people stood beneath the mistletoe, a kiss was expected, whether a quick peck on the cheek or something that made relatives cheer. Kids loved watching adults blush and dodge, while teenagers secretly maneuvered themselves into position with whoever they had been eyeing. The mistletoe became a focal point of the party, a spot everyone noticed and navigated with varying degrees of intention. Some families hung it in the same spot every year, turning that doorway into a landmark of holiday memory. Over time, concerns about the plant being mildly toxic to pets, combined with the awkwardness of forced affection, pushed mistletoe out of fashion. But anyone who remembers standing beneath those waxy leaves, heart pounding with anticipation, knows it added magic that plastic decorations could never replicate. Hanging real mistletoe over doorways was a holiday tradition that added a playful hint of romance to even the most ordinary family gathering. Bundles of the waxy green plant with its white berries appeared in stores each December, and families hung them from door frames with red ribbon, waiting to see who might get caught underneath. The rules were simple. If two people stood beneath the mistletoe, a kiss was expected, whether a quick peck on the cheek or something that made relatives cheer. Kids loved watching adults blush and dodge, while teenagers secretly maneuvered themselves into position with whoever they had been eyeing. The mistletoe became a focal point of the party, a spot everyone noticed and navigated with varying degrees of intention. Some families hung it in the same spot every year, turning that doorway into a landmark of holiday memory. Over time, concerns about the plant being mildly toxic to pets, combined with the awkwardness of forced affection, pushed mistletoe out of fashion. But anyone who remembers standing beneath those waxy leaves, heart pounding with anticipation, knows it added magic that plastic decorations could never replicate. Homemade salt dough ornaments were the crafty solution for families who could not afford store-bought decorations, and every batch told a story of love mixed with frustration. The recipe was simple enough, just flour, salt, and water, but getting the shapes to look like actual stars or angels required patience most kids did not have. Little fingers pressed too hard, rolled too thin, or forgot to poke the hole for the ribbon before baking. When they finally came out of the oven, the ornaments were lumpy, cracked, and slightly burned on the edges, yet parents hung them with pride anyway. Over the years, the dough absorbed moisture and started to crumble, leaving dusty trails beneath the tree like evidence of Christmases slowly falling apart. Some families painted them with whatever craft supplies they had, usually watercolors that bled or poster paint that chipped. Kids loved making them because it felt like contributing something real to the holiday, even if the results looked more like abstract art than traditional decor. Those little imperfect shapes became treasures because they held fingerprints, memories, and proof that Christmas could be made from almost nothing. Playing Christmas records on the turntable was a ritual that turned the living room into a concert hall filled with warmth and crackling static. Families would pull out favorite albums each December, sliding the vinyl from its sleeve with care reserved for fragile heirlooms. The needle would drop, a soft hiss would fill the room, and suddenly Bing Crosby or Nat King Cole was singing as if stopping by personally to celebrate. Kids learned early how to handle records properly, balancing them on fingertips and placing them gently on the spinning platter. The ritual of flipping the record halfway through became part of the experience, a pause that gave everyone time to refill drinks or check on the roast. Scratches and skips added character to songs that had been played dozens of times, familiar imperfections that became part of the music. Parents sang along without embarrassment, and grandparents closed their eyes and drifted back to Christmases from their own childhood. Streaming replaced turntables with convenience, but something intangible was lost when the ritual disappeared. Those who grew up placing needles on vinyl still remember how playing a record made every carol feel like an event worth gathering for. Mercury-filled glass ornaments handled by children were treasured decorations that families displayed with pride every December throughout the 1980s. These delicate silvered spheres had a weight and shimmer that plastic could never replicate, and people loved how they caught light and reflected the room in miniature curved mirrors. Parents handed them to children without hesitation, asking little helpers to place them carefully on lower branches where small hands could reach. What nobody considered was what happened when one of these ornaments slipped and shattered on the hardwood floor. The mercury coating scattered into tiny beads that rolled into cracks under furniture and across carpets where bare feet would later walk. Children fascinated by the strange liquid sometimes touched it, rolled it between their fingers, or tried gathering the beads before adults noticed the mess. Mercury poisoning does not announce itself immediately, and symptoms can take months or years to surface. By the time experts connected these ornaments to the dangers they carried, countless families had already swept up spills without knowing the risk they had inhaled or absorbed. Pogo sticks given without helmets or pads bounced into living rooms every Christmas morning throughout the 1980s, promising hours of backyard entertainment for children eager to master a new skill. These spring-loaded poles required balance, timing, and a willingness to fall repeatedly before getting the rhythm right. Kids bounced on driveways, sidewalks, and patios without any protective gear because helmets were for bicycles and pads were for football, not for a simple toy that just went up and down. What parents underestimated was the height these sticks could reach and the force with which children hit the ground when they inevitably lost control. Broken wrists were almost expected, a rite of passage that came with learning any new physical activity. But head injuries, chipped teeth, and fractured ankles filled emergency rooms with children who had simply been trying to beat their personal bounce records. The concrete and asphalt beneath their feet offered no forgiveness when landings went wrong. Manufacturers eventually added warnings and suggested safety equipment. But for years, the pogo stick remained a gift that came with invisible risks nobody thought to mention until the bruises appeared. Popcorn and cranberry garlands were one of those decorations that sounded charming in theory, but turned into a sticky, frustrating disaster in practice. Families gathered around bowls of plain popcorn and bags of fresh cranberries, armed with needles and thread, ready to create something beautiful together. Within minutes, popcorn crumbled under the needle, cranberries squirted juice onto shirts, and tempers flared as the thread tangled into impossible knots. Kids stabbed their fingers repeatedly, while parents pretended it was all part of the fun, even as frustration mounted behind forced smiles. The finished garlands looked rustic and handmade, but they also attracted fruit flies, dried into brittle strands, and left cranberry stains on everything. By New Year, the popcorn had gone stale, and the berries had shriveled into wrinkled red beads that no longer looked festive. Some families made new garlands every year, while others hung the same decaying strand until it fell apart entirely. The tradition was messy and impractical, yet stringing food onto thread felt like Christmas, in a way plastic beads never could. Those garlands carried the proof of effort, even if that effort ended in sore fingers. Lead-soldered stained glass tree toppers crowned Christmas trees in the 1980s with handcrafted elegance that mass-produced plastic stars could never match. Families treasured these delicate pieces, often receiving them as wedding gifts or inheriting them from grandparents who valued artisan craftsmanship. The colored glass caught tree lights beautifully, casting rainbow patterns across ceilings and walls while everyone gathered below to exchange presents. What made these toppers so structurally sound was the lead solder holding each piece of glass together, applied by craftspeople who worked without gloves or ventilation. Every time someone placed the topper on the tree, adjusted its position, or packed it away, tiny particles of lead transferred onto hands that later touched faces and food. Children lifted onto shoulders to place the star were exposed directly, their small fingers gripping the metal seams without anyone imagining the danger. When health authorities documented lead's devastating effects on developing brains, these handcrafted treasures became hazardous heirlooms. The artistry that once elevated holiday decorating now carries warnings about handling and display. Attending candlelit midnight mass was a Christmas Eve tradition that made even the sleepiest child feel the weight of something sacred and ancient. Families dressed in their finest clothes drove through quiet streets and entered churches glowing with the soft light of flickering candles. The air smelled of pine, melted wax, and the faint perfume of neighbors pressed close on wooden pews. Children fought to stay awake, heads drooping onto parents' shoulders before snapping upright at the sound of the choir. The service moved slowly, filled with readings and hymns that stretched across centuries, connecting everyone to believers who had gathered the same way for generations. At some point, small candles were passed from person to person, flames traveling through the congregation until the entire room glowed with individual lights held carefully. There was power in that moment, a reminder that each person was part of something larger. Parents watched their children's faces illuminated by candlelight and saw the same wonder they had felt at the same age. Today, midnight mass has grown less common as schedules shift, but those who attended still remember the hush that fell when the clock struck 12. Angel hair spun from real fiberglass spread across mantels and tabletops in the 1980s as the perfect finishing touch for any holiday display. It looked exactly like its name suggested, soft and ethereal, catching light in ways that made nativity scenes glow and Christmas villages shimmer with winter magic. Families draped it everywhere, tucking wisps around figurines, stretching it thin over branches, and piling it high beneath ceramic trees. Children loved touching it because it looked so delicate, so cloud-like, so irresistibly fluffy. What nobody warned them about was the material itself. Fiberglass is made of tiny glass fibers that embed themselves in skin on contact, causing itching, irritation, and rashes that can linger for days. Breathing the particles created invisible damage to lungs that accumulated quietly over years of holiday decorating. Parents with raw fingertips blamed dry winter air instead of the angel hair they had just handled. By the time safer synthetic alternatives replaced the original formula, an entire generation had decorated their way through countless Christmases without ever knowing they were spreading microscopic glass shards across their homes. Metal sleds without any safety features were the classic Christmas gift that families trusted for generations. And in the 1980s, they still flew down snowy hills with children aboard who had nothing but hope and gravity keeping them safe. These sleds were built from steel runners and wooden slats, heavy enough to build serious speed and sturdy enough to survive collisions that lighter plastic models could never withstand. Kids loved the thrill of racing downhill, steering with their feet, or simply holding on and praying the ride ended somewhere soft. What nobody talked about was how those steel runners sliced through snow and occasionally through skin when crashes sent riders tumbling. The wooden slats splintered on impact, and the metal edges grew sharp with rust and wear over seasons of use. Children collided with trees, fences, and each other at speeds that turned minor accidents into broken bones and concussions. Parents watched from the top of hills, assuming that the snow itself would cushion any fall, never realizing how hard frozen ground becomes beneath a thin white layer. The sleds that generations had trusted became symbols of an era that measured fun differently than safety. Spray-painted pine cones were the decoration of choice for families who believed that anything free could become festive with enough gold or silver paint. Kids scavenged cones from the backyard, the park, or the neighbor's yard when nobody was watching, hauling them home like treasures waiting to be transformed. Parents spread newspaper across the garage floor, shook the rattle can, and coated each cone in metallic mist that smelled like chemicals and ambition. The paint never covered evenly, leaving brown patches peeking through and drips pooling in the crevices like frozen metallic tears. Once dry, the cones were piled in bowls, hung from ribbons, or glued to wreaths alongside other budget crafts. The gold flaked off onto hands, tables, and anything else the cones touched, leaving glittery evidence of their humble origins everywhere. Some families added glitter on top of the paint, doubling down on sparkle in a way that made the mess worse. Kids loved the transformation, watching dull brown cones turn shiny. Those pine cones represented resourcefulness, the belief that beauty could be manufactured from whatever nature dropped in the yard for free. Opening one gift on Christmas Eve was the compromise every child dreamed about and every parent eventually surrendered to at least once. The anticipation of waiting until morning felt impossible when presents sat glowing beneath the tree, and one carefully chosen gift became the bridge between the endless evening and Christmas morning magic. Parents would select something small, maybe pajamas or a book, something that extended excitement without giving away real treasures. Children would tear off the paper with trembling hands, knowing this single gift was their only taste of what tomorrow would bring. Some families turned it into a ceremony, gathering around the tree with cocoa and letting each child choose which wrapped box would be theirs. The unwrapping became a performance, with everyone watching and drawing out the moment. For kids, that single gift made the final hours before bed bearable, something to hold while dreams of morning danced through their heads. The tradition created its own anticipation, a promise kept each year that made Christmas Eve feel almost as special as Christmas Day. Those who grew up with this ritual remember how it made waiting feel like part of the celebration. Asbestos snow blankets beneath the tree were a decorating staple that families trusted completely in the 1980s, despite warnings that had already begun circulating in other industries. These fluffy white sheets mimicked fresh snowfall so convincingly that people spread them under trees, across windowsills, and around elaborate holiday displays without ever questioning what made them so perfectly fireproof. The material felt soft, looked pristine, and solved the problem of bare tree stands in the most elegant way possible. What families did not understand was that asbestos fibers become dangerous the moment they are disturbed, releasing particles that lodge permanently in lung tissue. Every time someone adjusted the blanket or packed decorations away, invisible contamination drifted through the room. Children crawled across these blankets to reach presents on Christmas morning, pressing their faces close without any idea of the risk. It took decades of medical research before the scope of asbestos exposure became undeniable. By then, countless holiday memories had been built on a foundation that was quietly causing harm with every breath. Aluminum foil stars were the shiny solution for families who needed tree toppers and ornaments but refused to pay department store prices. Kids wrapped squares of foil around cardboard cutouts, pressing and crinkling until something vaguely star-shaped emerged from the kitchen table chaos. The foil tore easily, leaving ragged edges that parents tried to fold under while pretending not to notice the imperfections. Some families doubled up on layers, hoping extra foil would add sturdiness and shine, but the stars still bent and dented the moment anyone looked at them wrong. They dangled from yarn or leftover ribbon, spinning slowly and catching light in a way that almost looked intentional. When the tree lights hit them just right, the foil reflected colors across the room like tiny disco balls celebrating Christmas on a budget. The stars never lasted more than one season because storage flattened them into sad silver pancakes, making them felt like an annual ritual, a chance to create something from nothing while gathered around the table. Those aluminum foil stars represented the alchemy of poverty, transforming the cheapest materials into something that sparkled with hope. Nitrocellulose-coated paper chains hung in loops across 1980s living rooms, their shiny surfaces catching light and adding festive color to every corner. Children spent hours at kitchen tables cutting strips, gluing links together, and coating them with lacquer sprays that made the paper gleam like something from a department store display. The craft was a beloved holiday tradition, teaching patience and creativity while producing decorations the whole family could admire. What nobody realized was that nitrocellulose, the compound making that glossy finish possible, was essentially the same material used in early film stock notorious for fires. The coated chains hung near fireplaces, candles, and hot light bulbs, inches away from ignition sources that could transform innocent decorations into fast-spreading flames. Families strung them across rooms without understanding how quickly fire could race along those shiny links. When fire safety experts documented the risks of nitrocellulose in home crafts, the sprays were reformulated or discontinued. The cheerful paper chains that represented family togetherness became cautionary examples of flammable beauty. Salt dough ornaments handmade by children were treasures that hung on Christmas trees long after their creators had grown up and moved away. The recipe was simple, just flour, salt, and water mixed into stiff dough that small hands could shape into stars, bells, or lumpy creations that defied description. Parents helped roll the dough flat, handed over cookie cutters, and poked holes for ribbon before baking the shapes until they hardened. Kids painted their ornaments in bright colors that sometimes dripped, then added glitter that ended up everywhere except where intended. Each ornament was unique, carrying fingerprints and imperfections that made it irreplaceable. Families hung them on the tree with pride, sometimes laughing at how a reindeer became a blob or a snowman melted into abstract art. Over the years, ornaments accumulated, each a snapshot of a child's age and skill at the moment of creation. Some cracked or chipped, making survivors even more precious. Parents kept them in special boxes, pulling them out each December to remember the sticky afternoons that produced them. These handmade ornaments carried more meaning than store-bought decorations because they held the presence of people who made them. Wood-burning kits for young children appeared under Christmas trees throughout the 1980s, as the perfect gift for creative kids who loved making things with their hands. These sets came with heated metal tips, thin wooden plaques, and instruction booklets that encouraged children as young as 8 to plug in and start burning designs into soft pine surfaces. Parents saw them as educational and artistic, far more impressive than crayons or markers could ever be. The smell of scorched wood filled bedrooms as kids hunched over projects, holding red-hot metal inches from their fingers with nothing but concentration to keep them safe. Burns were common enough that most families expected them, treating blistered fingertips as a normal part of learning the craft. What nobody anticipated was how easily heated tips could ignite paper, fabric, or anything else nearby during unsupervised creativity. House fires traced back to wood-burning kits became a pattern that regulators could not ignore. The carefree creativity of those early kits now feels like a relic from a time that trusted children with dangers adults would never allow today. If these forgotten decorations brought back holiday memories, share your favorites in the comments. Tap like to keep the nostalgia alive and subscribe so you never miss another trip back to the Christmases we grew up with.